Hey y'all. Hey. Welcome to the Octavia Butler mixtape course. I'm Dr. Brianna Whiteside, and today we are talking about Butler Survivor. Let me know if y'all can hear me. Let me know if you can hear me. Let me know if you can see me clearly. I'm so excited to talk about this book, so I don't want to jump in before y'all have gotten the opportunity to let me know if you can hear me. So let me know. Can you hear me? Can you see me? I'm in a different location today. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Y'all, we will have to end class early today, so I can only do it till like 7 o'clock because I have to be somewhere at 7:30, and so I didn't want to cancel class tonight because we are learning or reading a new book, so I wanted to kind of at least give us something. You know what I'm saying? So if you want to come up on the panel, please come on up. This is the book that y'all have been arguably waiting for. This is, I understand that it may feel like a like minor, I guess, departure from what we've been reading so far. But it is a necessary book in the Patterning series. And so I think that if people don't have an opportunity to read Survivor, that they naturally go ahead and reject that Clay's arc. And so I always make the push for people to get Survivor, read Survivor. If I can, share it, we're going to share it. Because I think that Butler's decision to rescind this book kind of diminished the interest in the next book, right? So there's a lot to say there. But hey, y'all, if you want to come on the panel, come on up. Let's discuss this. I also want to say, as people are coming in, that this is the only book, arguably, that Butler deals with science and technology, right? And so while we could say, and historically we have classified Butler as a science fiction writer, not all of her works deal with science and technology. And so this book does, and I think it's important that we recognize that. I also want to caution us not to, as I said on the Substack, not to compare this book with any of the books we've already read, right? Well, you could compare it to Mind of My Mind because it was published. Mind of My Mind was published the year after this one. No, you couldn't. No, you compare it to Mind of My Mind because Mind of My Mind was published the year before this. But it would be unfair to kind of compare it to Kindred or even Wild Seed, right? If we're going to compare it, I want you to compare it to Mind of My Mind. And when we get to Pattern Master, which is her first book, I want you to compare it to that, okay? Before we get in here, of course, I'm going to read from an interview by Octavia Butler. And this is a very fascinating interview that I'm going to read out of, and I'm going to tell you why. But let me just go ahead and read it real quick. So this was published in 1997. The interview happened in 1997. And the interviewer was Marilyn McHuffie and Anna Louise Keating. And she says, you said that, this is the interviewer, you said that other people's reaction to your body influenced your writing. Can you think of any specific ways of writing or specific characters or specific texts that were influenced? So if you don't know, Butler was over 6 feet tall. She was a larger woman, and she was dyslexic or had dyslexia. And so you're a large woman, or Black woman writing, and she was a dark-skinned woman writing in the 1960s, writing in the 1970s, and, people were not as forgiving. People were not as forgiving of her size like they are now, right? And so when she is writing herself into a genre, but not just into a genre, she is writing herself into her characters. So this is Butler's response. She says, I tried being a small person. I tried to experience being small in person in Mind of My Mind and in Wild Seed. That was interesting because then I had to think of some problems that a small person might have to deal with and to think as a small person. My first attempt as being as big as I am was in Survivor. Here I have a character who is not necessarily fat, but she's very tall and androgynous looking. I used to be mistaken for a man a lot, and occasionally somebody would try to chase me out of the ladies' room, which used to upset the hell out of me. when when I first read this wasn't the first time that I read this. When I'm reading it with you, I was actually preparing to write a paper in Melis, and I came across this quote, right? This thought from Butler, right? That she was androgynous, looking at that people mistook her for a man, and I was thinking about how all of that. Is still prevalent today, but how it could have affected her mental health. And so when I read this, I understood some of her deeper thoughts and feelings that she shared in the archive about not being able to find love and people not finding her attractive and all the things that comes with being a larger Black woman. And so for a lack of, I don't know, I don't even know how to, it's hard for me to kind of articulate that feeling and what I want to say around it, but I want us to think about that as we're thinking about power and Butler saying that, hey, I experimented with being small in Wild Seed and in Mind of My Mind, but now with Elena, I am trying to play with being big and androgynous and not necessarily attractive, right? And so what does it mean for a person who is not attractive to gain some type of power? You know what I mean? And so we can think about those things as we move forward in the text. I don't know if y'all caught that reference from Diu when he kind of mentioned that Elena wasn't attractive when he first met her either, right? And so I think that attractiveness, the respectability politics, beauty politics, all of these things play a role, especially since we have encountered two beautiful characters. And by beautiful, I mean, Anyanwu, she could go ahead and shapeshift right into a younger, more acceptable and desirable body. And then you have Mary, this light-skinned, brown-skinned girl with traffic light green eyes, considered attractive. And now you have Elena, the only survivor, a Black survivor who is not attractive, but still having to do this type of labor. I think we should consider what that would mean for her. But okay, enough. You didn't come to hear me talk about give my Easter speech about respectability politics or anything like that. Panelists, if y'all want to come on the panel, y'all feel free. Panelists, what y'all got? What you think? Tell me your experience with the book.
It's funny that I didn't think that she was not attractive because in the book it said that she was mixed, Asian and Black. So I assumed because she was mixed, she was told that she was an attractive or average looking woman. I know that the How would describe her as not being attractive. That makes sense. She's a different species. Like, why would he find her attractive? I really like the book. I love anything that's off world. I love encountering new species. So my first love is the Xeno series. So this is like right up my alley. I really,
Oh yeah, falls right into it.
and I'm enjoying Elena, and I really like her character, and
Mm-hmm.
I really like all the characters. It's a really good book so far.
I'm happy to hear that. Okay. Off world. I'll be the first to admit that the first time that I read Survivor, because it was off world, and I don't know if you all heard me say this before, but I was the girl who who thought she did not like science fiction because it made me think of Star Wars and Star Trek, right? And so instantly I was like, nope, I don't like this. This is that weird Star Wars, Star Trek stuff. And so I was a little bit skeptical of the text. It was a lot of it was a lot of distance that I had to overcome to actually start enjoying the book. But once I finished the book, I understood its relevance and why it was so important to this series and why we needed an off-world book. Because we would just still be wrapped in the patternist and clay art mind. Let me say this before we move on to the next person. Y'all, I know some people were kind of confused, and I don't think it was you all, but some comments that I was getting under some of my videos asking why I put Survivor first. If we are actually meeting, I put that in loose quotes, air quotes, we're meeting the clay arcs. We don't physically meet the clay arcs. We're meeting them in the missionary's memory, just like we are remembering the telepaths from the missionary's memory. It is not until Clay's arc that we meet them. And I do want to encourage everyone to follow along with the post, the free post, that I'm giving because I'm trying to bridge a lot of backstory that you would never know. It doesn't show up in Clay's arc and it will not show up in the book, but it is in the archive. So I'm trying to bridge a lot of information and give you a lot of information that you would need to know in order to help give you a smooth transition through the series. Okay. All right. Who else wants to share?
Well, I'm just gonna say you totally took my spirit out when you said that awful thing about not liking Star Trek or Star Wars. I can't I don't know if I can move past that to even just trying to process that.
Forgive me. I beg. I beg. Forgive me.
I'm like, I just I just don't understand.
I'm just
Because I
saying,
am
y'all.
because I am a big Star Trek and Star Wars fan. I have to say the fact that they were in space and encountering these new aliens or whatever else picked it up for me. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I liked that whole thing with that because again, this is even though she said I read your articles. World building is always fascinating, and if you do world building really well, it just takes whatever the drama or the plot line to a whole nother level for me. And so I think she did that. So yeah,
Yeah. Is this your first time
I'm
reading Survivor?
yes, it's my first time reading it. So
Oh, okay.
so I was just like, oh man, it like even the way they got there, just it was a lot of stuff that I just really it really and she does really well. And I was struggling with her reasoning why she didn't want this book reprinted and everything
Mhm.
else. I've read your notes, all of that, but I've been struggling with the way she's thinking about it because for me, I'm like, this is it's to me it is forward thinking.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is
And
it
from what
is saying a whole lot of stuff. So it just was like I don't know. I wish I yeah yeah
Yeah, and in addition to her not liking the narrative, what she says is a good story told badly. I don't know if I ever said this because what I say just circles in my mind, but another reason that she did, um, let me do this mute. Hold on. Okay, another reason that she did rescind the text is because her editor was very heavy-handed on the edits, and so as a result of him being very heavy-handed, by the time she we see this version, he had almost entirely changed the narrative, and she couldn't get back. And so, of course, she wanted to do the ethnographic work for Kindred, which is published the next year, and she needed money. And so, financial pressure, her needing money, and those heavy handed edits by her white editor, Harlan, um, kind of changed the narrative for her. And also, she was like, in her mind, she was still telling the same story and she wanted to tell a different story. And, when you need money, when you're strapped for cash, she hadn't won a MacArthur at the time. She's writing herself into a genre that does not respect Black people, but does not consider Black women. And she had to do what she had to do, which is why she published it and then quickly pulled it back that same year. Okay. Anybody else want to go?
I was I was gonna say that makes sense, but
You?
it's a good
Oh, sorry.
story. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say this was my first time reading this one.
Oh,
I'm sad to hear that she didn't like it and that the editor was heavy-handed because I really enjoyed this one. I was having a hard time with the Patternist series, like I don't know, the eugenics of it all was really, really, really made it a hard read, tying that with like just what we actually went through in slavery, like breeding people for their best quality. So I really enjoyed kind of like this step away
mm,
from that and into a new world and into a new possibilities. And I'm already seeing a lot of the themes that she's working with in this or what she was trying to work with in this. And so, if I know anything about her, we'll be getting into it soon. But so far, I was really enjoying it.
you know what? I don't think y'all gonna get into it yet in this book. Not this one.
No? Okay.
I don't think so. I think Elena is the most agreeable character to me. And I think that because she's so agreeable and she's a political agent, I see her as, both savior and
Yes.
spy, right? And that is important to consider. Also, we also have to consider that she is writing this book in the middle of this race to space conversation that they're having in the 70s, right? And
Yes.
before we get Mae Jemison, we get
It's got to be bold to be putting black people in space first.
right. Yeah, but thank you for sharing and welcome to the panel. All right, who else?
I wanted to say it took me a little while to get into the book. It was
Yeah.
just so many names. I was confused. I was rereading stuff. But once I got into it and I kind of oriented myself, I was just like reading through it and only stopping to like take notes and like make sense of what she was saying because I feel like she put so much into this story and we've only read what like 92 pages of it, and
Mhm.
I just like have a million thoughts about how everything is going to play out. I'm curious about the breeding that's happening. I'm curious about like some of the secrecy that's happening, um which feels necessary, but I'm curious to see like what ends up happening, and the three like races of people. Or I guess I was kind of confused about if the Garkin, is that how you pronounce it? Garkins in the Takons are like different species or
Same
different
species, different
races.
culture.
Okay. It's different cultures, yeah. And so I'm really curious to see like how the humans being outsiders of like this war between the two of them will impact like I don't know. I guess just everything. Like everything is up for grabs right now. I feel like, the story is really just getting good.
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
made myself stop when we were supposed to stop. But right after this, I'm reading the rest of it for sure.
Well, that's
It was
good that
kind
you
of,
want to go ahead.
I was gonna say, it was kind of giving me like Western vibes. Like think about people on the prairies and you're encountering different, like native tribes, and trying to see
Exactly.
what's going on in that area around you. That's what it was giving me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. These are the same species of people, just in different native tribes. And, of course, they're fighting for power, they're fighting for territory, they're fighting for respect, but they are the same people. You know what I mean? And so on the Substack today, I was messaging back. I don't remember who I was messaging when we were talking about addiction. And of course, addiction is in the narrative, right? It's addiction to the Mikola fruit, which makes people enslaved to the Garcon, I think, yes. And I believe that I kind of want to start there with addiction because I think it is a metaphor for something much deeper, right? Remember, I said, y'all, when she's writing this series, that she is making a comment. She says that she is making a comment about Black America. And so in every book of this series, we have to ask ourselves, what comment is she making about Black America? And I think about addiction here, right? We have this only survivor who is Elena. She's a survivor of multiple things, right? Survivor of coming from Earth to space. She survives a dominantly white missionary community. She survives being a captive of an alien species. She's the only person to survive Mikola withdrawal, right? So she's a survivor of multiple things right now. But with addiction in mind, I did ask this question today, so you might not have seen it. So let's get into it. So it says in Survivor, Butler presents addiction not merely as a physical dependency, but as a mechanism of social and political control. The missionaries' reliance on Mikola renders them vulnerable to the Garcon, stripping them of autonomy and reinforcing their subjugation. How does Butler's depiction of addiction function as an extended metaphor for colonial domination, assimilation, and psychological bondage? And in what ways does the novel complicate traditional narratives of agency and resistance by showing how addiction alters not only the body, but also cultural memory and self-determination? So we can answer any of those two. And these questions are on the Substack.
I'll
Just say
just
that
say I feel
again. I'm
like a
sorry.
couple of things. Oh, go ahead.
No, just say that again. I heard some of it, but I don't know. Maybe my sound is going in and out.
Oh yeah, you want me to repeat the questions? Okay. So the first question is, how does Butler's depiction of addiction function as an extended metaphor for colonial domination, assimilation, and psychological bondage? And then the second question is, in what ways does the novel complicate traditional narratives of agency and resistance by showing how addiction alters not only the body, but also cultural memory and self-determination? So Sir Maxim, let's build on Sir Maxim, what he says in the chat. He says, immediately makes me think of, makes me think of the way certain governments put drugs into minority communities. Absolutely. They were planted there. You know, the crack epidemic. Because who calling me in the middle of class? Sorry, y'all.
I feel like that's a good surface one, but also like underlying, if you just think of like the greater systems that they use, like if you think of capitalism as a drug, right? Of how you try to remove yourself from that system and you really can't survive outside of it where we are. Like there's some other systems like that that I think of that could fit in that space as well.
Yep, capitalism for sure. And it's so fascinating because now you have this black character, this black woman character trying to wean herself off of this addiction, right? Off of this thing that has been force fed. And it's so fascinating. Remember how they didn't even know that they would become addicted to this substance, right? They thought, okay, we're eating this, it's great. Let's consume it. And you've consumed it so much that now you can't function without it. It's deep within you, right? It's kind of like how we're fed a lot of stuff in society today. Some foods, right? Some ways of being. Someone says modern medicine, right? Eli says it was presented as a gift, right? Of course, they can't say, hey, this is poison. Think about this. We could think about the Tuskegee experiment if we want to go there. It wasn't an addiction, but what this person in the Eli says in the chat, it was presented as a gift. We're going to help cure syphilis. Come, get this. And then you mass unalive a lot of people in the South.
It makes me think of when we talk about colonialism, we talk about the Catholic Church, and we
Maisha, you
talk
kind
about.
of mumbled a little bit. You muffled a little.
Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay, so when we talk about colonialism and we talk about the Catholic Church and we talk about this idea of spreading God and glory across the New World and indoctrinating indigenous people as well as enslaved Africans into Christian doctrine so that they assimilate into society in the way that works for Europeans during that time period, right? And now we speed up to modern day, how we have adopted, at least in America, adopted much of our European uh, captors' culture and continue. We had to use that to shape our own culture within that culture, and how it's still something that we depending on the groups may elevate in black culture. Like, Christianity is very much elevated in black culture, I think. And there is a subset of African Americans and black people in the diaspora that are now starting to kind of like remove what we've known for years and what we've incorporated into our culture when it comes to Christianity, but it still is plays a major role in our identity today after what we've been through in the last 500 years, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And now, as you were speaking, I was thinking about what proximity to whiteness does for this too, right? Because Elena's parents and majority of the missionary colony, they're white. And she has this proximity to whiteness, which is a kind of acceptable, but not really. But once she totally goes into the alien settlement and then has to come out of this alien or other settlement and come back to close to whiteness, there is this hesitancy in which they deal with her. They deal with her with this long-handed, this long-handled spoon. And it just makes me think of, in what way is it okay, based on what you were saying, like Christianity or religious tolerance? Is it only in proximity to whiteness or not? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that it's two things I thought about when I was reading the beginning of this book was Alana has the ability, like it's a survivor. She has the ability to survive, and she wears a mask. So I think about
Mm-hmm.
that poem, wearing the mask, right?
All orange
So
number.
right, so she is somebody who got kicked out of the patternist thing, and she's one of these wild people that are out there, and so she became this animal or this wild, as they could describe it, an animal, but she became a survivor, living in the following the rules that were necessary there. And then when she saw that these people were going to take her in and they were going to feed her and provide her some sort of safety, she literally did whatever they expected of her so that she could stay in that place. It
Yeah.
wasn't like she believed, like she doesn't believe what they believe. She's just
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, if you want me to pray 20,000 times or you want me to do whatever else, I will do it because I'm going to get food.
Yeah.
So I think that that's who she is. It's like, I'm just going to try to do this. When they were on earth, they rejected her. The white
Yeah.
settlers, they had like, I mean, but she's black. I mean, they made a big deal about that.
Because she wasn't
And
civilized.
right, she wasn't civilized, but they made it about that also, right? Um,
Yeah.
you didn't see my air quotes, but I'm doing the same thing, air quotes. And then and then I thought, okay, so and then when she gets, and then it's kind of reversed. So one of the things about Jules is he's resentful because he had been a slave before, and now he gets to the planet, and he recognizes that the Gorkon have basically enslaved him again.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Mm-hmm.
thought, and a lot of the white colonists thought they had rose above that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
And
that
look,
also was, and I think that's one of the reasons, missionaries, I'm sorry. And I think that that's one of the reasons they felt arrogant about shunning her. And then also feeling like, how dare these animals couldn't, they looked at this other species and thought they were less than them.
yeah, and so we have to remember, like, their mission, right? Their colonial mission was to spread the sacred image of God. And so one of the reasons why, of course, that they leave Earth is because the clay arcs are now. We'll see what happens. Or I don't want to tell y'all too much, but they're starting to change the image of the human. And so now they're meeting these people who are not human, they're humanoids. They're thinking, we're going to come colonize them. We're going to be the great white saviors. We're going to come and humanize them. And this will be our one up, because we don't have a one up over the patternists. We don't have a one up over the clay arcs, but we will have a one up over the other. And of course, they're upset because the Garcon, the Ticon have their own hierarchy. They don't respect bodies in the same way that humans rank bodies. They respect bodies based on color, right? And things like that. And then they're categorized into these categories that do not include human. So now the humans are once again cattle. Okay.
Yeah. The cattle, and they can't, and the color that they respect is not white.
Blue.
It's blue. Right. It's completely like, so it's not, so you can't fake that. So they are powerless. And I think that it also is interesting that they, first they were like being cautious about eating the food. And then when they felt like, oh, it can be used for all these different things, this is the same. I mean, they looked at it as a precious gift.
Yes. Yeah.
They
I
looked at
think
it as
that one of
precious.
the reasons why I think we should always read this book is because this is the only real time that we're going to see the effects of patternist colonial rule on the mutes. Like, this is the only mute story that's really about them. And one of my arguments, you all will see my entire argument on Monday, where I published an entire paper on this book, is that they're unable to survive or thrive in space because they're still dealing with the remnants of colonialism. They're not that far removed. How can you expect them to, and this is a conversation that we be having about Black folks in America, you're not that far removed. How can you expect them to go to another place to thrive, survive, and do all the things that they could not do under patternist colonialism in a short amount of time? Yes, they were kind of arrogant to believe that they could leave Earth and colonize another, I was going to say country, another planet or another world. But we're seeing them struggle under the weight. They're still struggling under the weight, though their oppressors are not there because they have been mentally conditioned. Taichi, what's up?
Hey y'all, how y'all doing? I have entered the chat once again. How y'all doing? Good evening. Um, I wanted to say a couple of things. I don't have a hate bandwagon just yet. I'm kind of scoping the scenery out. Um, but I think one Sir Maxim put in the chat that um, bigotry kills all across the board, and it enables you to underestimate things and not really see things for what they are. So I completely agree with that. I also think that the way that drugs work and conditioning works is when you create an environment, I think, especially here in the United States, where people are looking for escapism. And people, like, you make conditions so tough and so hard that they're willing to do anything, or they get real comfortable accepting whatever it is that you are giving them. For example, somebody was talking about like how escapism, how we binge shows, and how we, binge shows, watch Netflix, go through a whole bunch of books, and that's our deviation from reality, while other people might choose drugs and things like that. But it's literally because of the environment you're living in, and you're seeing all this chaos and you're trying to find a semblance of joy. I think that's why that all works, right? So we're leaving Earth because the Clayarchs have gone mad and everything is, going to hell for them, and so they think that they can escape, and they're going to find a planet where they can be superior and they can dominate and they can flourish, and it's in that escapism because they think that they can go somewhere else and do that, because conditions were so hard that they just accept fruit. They didn't ask any questions. They didn't sniff it. They didn't do the stuff that we traditionally do to make sure that everything is above board, because in their mind, oh, they wouldn't dare. They're not sophisticated enough. I don't think. And I think we carry that same arrogant mindset when we're going into space now. When all of these voyages up into space now, we think that we can find, a planet to go and colonize and everything will be fine. And we're so superior and we're so dominant. And there's just so many things that we just don't know. Everything in outer space is in the testing P phase. And we just think that we're going to go in there and we're going to just regulate. And it's just so funny. It's just so funny. Everything just repeats itself in a cycle. So, yeah.
Yeah. I want to just clarify that the reason that they are permitted to leave Earth, they want to leave Earth, right? They want to leave patternist enslavement, but the reason why they really left, and I think they said it, and it could have been a passing mention, is that the Clayarchs are challenging the patternists, and they cannot survive in a lot of ways. Not saying that they're extinct, but the Clayarchs are a different breed of human. I think in Butler's notes, I should say this too, that she says that in Clayarch, she's looking at what it means for the animalistic side of humans to come out full force. So that is going to be on full display. So you have this animalistic being that we're going to meet in the next book, and then you have the patternists who are at war, who we met in the last book, and so they're leaving because the patternists, the Clayarchs, are not human, and the patternists want to preserve the sacred image of the human. So while the missionaries turn to faith because that's their only way that they can tolerate being oppressed by the patternists, similar to how Black folks turn to religion, spirituality, and all those other things to tolerate being enslaved. they turn to religion because that's all they have, right? But the pattern let them leave because they want to preserve the human body and the human mind. Once you become a clay ark, you become something else. And so ultimately, the arrogance of humanity, I think that's what Tai Chi was getting at. We're very arrogant. We're very arrogant to think that there are not other things in the world that we don't know. We're very arrogant to continue to try to explore the depths of the sea. And we'll see what happens to us, to be honest, for the people who try to go colonize those places. I think that we should also remember, I'm trying to remember what you said. You said something else that I wanted to say. Don't even worry about it. Anybody else want to go?
Yes, I wanted to talk a little bit too about like the addiction piece, because one of the things that caught my attention was when Jules and Dew are having this conversation about the missionaries leaving. And Jules is like, well, do they grow this fruit anywhere else on this planet? And Dew is like there's less and less of it. Like where you're going to be safe, there will not be enough of it to maintain this addiction. And this idea that like in order to be truly free, you have to rid yourself of the addiction given to you by your oppressor. And so when I was thinking about the addiction, I was specifically thinking about these like white beauty standards that have been placed upon the Black community, and how like we cannot take that with us into freedom. We have to leave that behind. But it is hard to encourage people to leave that behind because, they're used to those ideals. And what is there if not that?
Yeah, so you're referring to the Victorian respectability politics and those beauty standards, right? That Black women have been trying to maybe historically have been encouraged. I'm not going to say trying, encouraged to assimilate to be acceptable, to have the body type, to have the features, to do the things. And yes, Butler is making a comment that this will not sustain you. Even if you bought into it and even if it's been forced down your throat, it is not for you. You have to win yourself off of this thing. But also, we can also think how difficult it is to win yourself off of something that you've been indoctrinated to want arguably since birth. For some people, like these missionaries have children, and I saw someone in the chat say, didn't the pattern send their children to space? No, they could not. Okay, okay. They could not survive in space because they could not break the mental link with the people on Earth. And so in the text, it says that they tried. So this missionary group that is in space, this is not the first group in space, right? This is just the group that we're seeing. And so once the children end up, as and coming into their abilities, they cannot survive without being anchored there. The people who they did allow to go into space were called side cripples. And I don't know if that's a derogatory term or not, but that's what Butler called them. Side cripples, meaning people with a little extra. So they're not fully mutes. They're people who just did not fully transition into a telepath, but they still had that psionic ability. And they allowed them, along with the Dana drive, Play Dana, the technology, to go to space and they programmed them to unalive themselves. And the reason is because they weren't supposed to always come back. If they come back, you're supposed, it could wreak havoc. That's what I'm gonna say, because I don't want to give too much of Clay's arc away. But yeah, so no, the Patternist children are not up there. They're not up there. And this is not the first mission. There have been several missions, and a lot of them failed. Okay.
In your Substack, you did this whole thing about, and I think this is really important, and it was also in the book, about how Jules and his missionaries basically became free. and it
Mm-hmm.
was a decision by Mary to let
Mm-hmm.
them go, to let them be free, because she recognized that they needed mutes, or they needed these people to be able to do that. And then also the fact that, like you said, there were other flights that were happening, other space journeys that were happening that failed because the patterners could not survive, being detached.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's interesting to me because it's like he was able to create this faith and have these people join together, and them to be on this thing. But the missionaries were largely white. They were very kind of like, you have to meet a certain kind of criteria to be part of what this is going on, and they acted in certain ways like the patterners,
Yeah.
because they're like, if you're not one of us, you're not really part of what we're doing. We're not accepting some of these other people. We're just not doing it.
And
And
even
I
part. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
and I was just thinking, like, is that all I'm doing is pay, copy and paste. So I'm making myself the center, but I'm copying and pasting the oppressive thinking patterns, everything that I have been subject to, and I'm doing the same things to this new group of people, and anybody who does not fit into what I deem is colonizers, because that's what it is. Are other. So, like, even though I was a slave, I'm still acting in the same oppressive manner. I'm still thinking about. I'm flowering it up because I'm talking about God and other stuff. But they were like, the idea that the Gorkhans were actually intelligent was just, like, how they're not human. Like, there's
Yeah.
no way. There's like no
And
way. Just the whole thing, and even the fact that they jumped on Alana because she's of mixed heritage. She's black and Asian, and they, like, I mean, is she okay? I mean, are you going to keep her in your house? Just that whole thing. It just was like, you're just repeating the same pattern.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that if so, when they're referring to Elena as a savage, as a wild person, right? They're not just saying that because she lived in the wild. They're saying that because she's black. Also, when they're talking about, there was this passing mention, it was this conversation where Elena was talking about how they felt that there couldn't be any crossbreeding between, I don't want to say crossbreeding, intermingling between the Garcon and the Ticon, and Butler kind of says it's already happening. They're already mixing DNA together, right? They're already creating these other beings. But it was this moment when Elena made a comment, or Butler made the comment for Elena, that the missionaries would be surprised basically how well endowed these aliens are, right? They do have, but their genitals are just covered more better than the American male, or than the male body is covered. And so there's this ranking that they're doing against themselves, like the missionaries, like, well, they don't have this, they don't have that, they don't have this, therefore they are less than and subhuman. But what we're seeing here is this pushback, right? We are not subhuman. You will be our slave. We will not bend to the human need because you just got here.
Can I just piggyback off of what she was saying, because it made me think that I think Butler's really talking about human nature. And it seems like in all her books, we just can't escape this nature to dominate others, right? We left the planet because we were being dominated. And then we go to a new planet where there's already a species that has a civilization that is hundreds, if not thousands of years old, advanced, they're writing, they have their own languages and dialects, and yet the people get there, they don't even want to learn anything about them. They've already deemed them below them, and human nature starts to play out again. Well, I'm better than you, and we're going to like settle here and take over. And I think Butler is just showing that, and it's I think she's just showing that humans have this need to dominate where they go, wherever they go, just have this need to dominate. And that is a part of our nature, because no matter who the group is, whether they're white or black or Asian or whatever, it just keeps happening over and over again. And in the end, it's leading us to destruction.
So she has a term for that. It's called the human contradiction. And it's her belief that intelligence and hierarchical behavior cannot coexist. And because Butler feels that intelligence is relatively new compared to the hierarchical nature of people, she continues to play with this idea or kind of write through this idea in several of her works. More specifically, you'll see it in the Xenogenesis trilogy. And there's a line, because I was looking at something that I wrote, the Owen Collie say, to give humans another chance at procreation would be like breeding intelligent beings for the sole purpose of having them kill one another. Human purpose isn't what you say it is, it's what your biology says it is, it's what your genes say it is. So ultimately, Butler is making this critique that you all think you're so smart, you think you're intelligent, but your hierarchical nature will never let you be intelligent, truly intelligent, right? Because you're so hierarchical. So it is this human tendency for people to just want to dominate each other. It is to own you, to rank higher than you, to inflict pain on you. So her idea, the human contradiction, is that intelligence and hierarchical behavior cannot coexist.
I completely agree with that statement, and it's all just throughout. Like if there was, breadcrumbs before, and we see it at the beginning of the book, but that entire exchange with Jules and DeWitt, and then when Nathan comes in, it's just so, I don't know, it lays everything out. And he's just like, he has to become threatening in order for you to hear logic. And that was crazy. Like you didn't you're supposed to be human. You're supposed to have brain cells. You're supposed to, be a critical thinker, logic, all of that stuff. I'm telling you what's going on, and you're still not accepting it because you can't fathom the idea that, one, you're not smarter than somebody that you deem yourself higher than, and two, that you've, I guess, let yourself be duped. But you did when you were on Earth. Why is it that you can accept it from like beings but not other beings? And it just lays everything out. And that was actually my favorite piece of dialogue. And I love DeWitt as a character already. Big energy. I love it.
Well, he does say, what did he say? I am absolute death or certain death or sudden death. One of the two. So he's basically saying you can't come against
death. He said, I can kill you and you couldn't do anything about it. So would you want to die with me or do you want to die with him? Makes me no difference. Big energy. Loved it.
Okay. Well, we don't got a hate train from you. I'm happy about that. Okay.
I was going to say, although, like your statement about it being human nature, I agree that that's what she's trying to say, but I would definitely point out that that might be a symptom of the ways in which the world has been colonized, and that it may not necessarily be human nature. And it makes me think of the Stanford prison experiment, where they were trying to prove that if people left to their own devices, that they would be cruel, that they would torture each other, and then it's actually really a study of a specific group of people and how they would respond in that environment. That human nature may not be that we are always trying to be hierarchical and always trying to hold ourselves over each other, but that the people that we have come into contact with and that have conditioned us all have made it seem that way, that that's all we've gotten to study because they've destroyed any other way of being.
Okay. We can float that as a balloon. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I just know that it's complicated, and we see over and over again hierarchy winning in a lot of ways over intelligence. Like, I know we like to say history repeats itself and we should learn from history, but in a lot of ways we don't learn. So okay, where y'all want to go now? We got 10 minutes because I have to hop off here at 7 tonight. I said that in the beginning, y'all, so we can go wherever y'all want to go because we got 10 minutes. Or we can go where I want to go. One thing I want to talk about, let's talk about this. I did not write this in the questions, but it is in Butler's notes, and she's talking about the heavy edits that Harlan did. And she's, in a lot of ways, she says that he basically was trying to rewrite Elena as a man. And I'm curious, did you all get more masculine traits and energy from Elena as a result of that? Like, did that show up on the page for you? Because she read differently than the other female characters that we encountered before.
You I don't know. I can't remember the protagonist that's in the parables, but what her
Oh,
name
Lord.
in the parables, but Alana reminds me of her because she again is somebody who survives, and that's just and I just I that I think that there is a softness that black women are not always afforded, and you have to constantly be strategic about what you do, how you say or whatever, and that reads as being aggressive or manly or whatever. But to me, Alana is like, okay, I need to look at my situation and what I'm capable of doing and what I can do in order to put myself in a better situation. And I think that those traits or that thinking is something that people typically assign as male. But I don't know if that is. I think that that's in our culture or whatever, is that we women have to do that. We have to figure out how we're going to make it through so we can take care of our families and we can grow community and we can do all things. Whereas that may not be true in other societies,
Yeah, she was
other
giving me
communities.
energy like my grandma, where it's
Yes.
like you got to do what you got to do to survive, and it feels more like water, right? Like you coming across
Yes.
these obstacles, and you're like, how are we going to get around this to keep moving forward, to keep our people safe, to all those things that you were saying. To me, she feels like water, so it doesn't necessarily feel masculine because I know a lot of women in my life that acted in that same way.
I feel like this is also like um the editor is white, right?
White man. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And I feel like how white people in general see or like perceive women and how black women are outside of um
Hmm.
that like narrative. Like black women are not allowed to be dainty. We're not on average like small and cute and all these other things. Like we look different. Um and I wonder if, and also we act different because of what we've been through, being both black and uh, a woman. And I wonder if, like, when this editor was reading this, he did not understand how a woman could act like this, um, because white women don't act like this, and that maybe it felt more like how a man would act. So was trying to be like, oh no, this character should be a man because this is how a man acts. But how black women act and how white women act are not the same and can never be the same.
Yeah, I
It's
think we have to go ahead before I
Oh,
go.
oh, sorry. No, I was gonna say I didn't get masculine at all. I got a person who's adapting to all these new situations, and you have to be able to adapt when your situation is constantly changing every 2 to 3 years, which it has for her. Also, she gave birth in the book, which is inherently something that women do, and she lost a child, and instead of being emotional about the loss of that child, she had to be strategic because she says it herself. She has to show up for the missionaries and play the role there, but she also has to play the role for the people she was with. I don't know how to pronounce it, but the people she was with for 2 years as well. And she said, and soon I'm going to have to do the same thing for the Gherkins. So she understands that in order to have the situation end well, she has to play different roles. She has to adapt to every situation in order to survive. And I think surviving is inherently human and not a gender thing.
Yes. So the reason why I posed that question and wanted us to talk about that is because one, we have to remember when this book was published, but it was also written. So it was published in 78. It was written, I think, in like 76-ish before it was published. And we also have to remember that the feminist movement did not include the black women, the first wave feminism, right? And so I'm asking these questions because I'm thinking about, well, we haven't gotten to that part of the book where I'm thinking about, but I'm asking this question because she does present differently than Mary would has presented. And of course, this was a coming of age story, but even if we consider Dana, she's presenting differently than Dana. Also, Anyanwu, she's presenting differently than Anyanwu, right? And so her strength, for sure, she reminds a lot of us of our mothers and grandmothers, right? This strength, but it's also a dis-ease called strength, right? And this strength can be problematic to Black, not can be, is in a lot of ways problematic to Black women, and historically has led to a lot of problems, health problems, right? And so the reason why I'm asking that question, because I'm trying to see how people is perceived, how you are perceiving her on the page, because how we perceive her in the 2025 is totally different than how people perceived her in the 70s, right? When Black women are trying to still be seen as women and be considered as women and have these female women rights. Yeah, she's very familiar to us, but I'm trying to also think through her audience wasn't just Black people. Some white people read her audience. They were feminists reading her, according to Butler. Feminists, the gays, these are Butler's words, and some Black women who were interested in science fiction, but there wasn't a large number of them. So I'm just curious as to how she was coming across on the page, because of course, Harlan did do heavy edits. She had to sell it as is in order to get her the money, but she does rescind it. So I don't think it's also necessarily, because we could also say, I don't know which one of the panelists said she was a mother and she had a child, but that really was historically in the context of Black women and having birth, you still weren't considered a woman as a Black woman having a kid because you were having property.
Yeah, I guess I don't understand what she wanted to have happen, and I'm trying to think about like in the 70s what that was like. There was it's I think when we think about femininity and we talk about the supposedly trad wife scenario or what that was like, as I remind people, Black women have always had to work.
Been
They've
working.
always had to work. Labor, domestic labor. I mean, there were laws put into place that said you had to work. And so they were at a point where even the poorest white person with pennies could get a washerwoman or somebody to come in and cook or tend their gardens or do whatever it was. Like that's how it was. It wasn't, when they said all of a sudden, women went to work, they were talking about white women because Black women had been working. They've been working in their homes or in their fields or
Yeah,
whatever. They have always been working.
nursing their children.
Right. And taking care of their children and neglecting their own. So so when she's talking about like she thought that, he made her too um too masculine, I'm struggling with what femininity was Octavia looking for, because that wasn't what the reality, that for most Black women that wasn't a reality. If you were a Black woman and you were able to be a stay-at-home mom, oh, you was in hot cotton, because
Right.
that just was not the reality. It
Yeah.
wasn't the reality in the 60s, it definitely wasn't the reality in the 70s, and then it never was like this like decades of a legion of stay-at-home moms, unless
Yeah.
your husband had money and
Yeah.
had a lot of money to do that, whereas whites could have no money. They,
Yeah.
were not necessarily living high on the hog, and they could afford to have a domestic come by.
Yeah. I think the struggle with this character for Butler was, as I said in the beginning, this was the first time that she was experimenting with a character that's physically as large as she was. I also read from the conversations with Butler that she says, she used to get chased out of the women's bathroom because people thought she was male, and so now she's experimenting with this androgynous looking character. And I think some of her hesitancy or her struggle with this character is that you have this once she's writing herself, this is Butler experimenting with who she is in this text. So you have her trying to write through some of the traumatic experiences and trying to write through self-acceptance, and then also trying to appease the white male gaze, right? Coming in on this character. And so, of course, if you're trying to write through some of maybe your own trauma or experiences or emotions, and now you have this white male character turning this character into a man, but y'all land on the androgyny of her, that could be a struggle. So maybe she wanted her to be more acceptable as feminine because Butler herself wanted to be more acceptable and desired too. Okay, that's a lot. Y'all, I gotta get off of here early tonight. Tomorrow, what's dropping are the discussion questions for part 2. We're back next Wednesday for part 2. Monday, I'm releasing an entire journal article on this that I wrote for Melis. Is going to be on the free side. So if you don't want any spoilers, don't read it on Monday. It's titled Octavia's First Afronaut. Do not read it until you finish the text. But it's on there because I want you all to see how I'm thinking through this text and how I think this text can be redeemed. And I'm trying to argue that it should be reprinted. They don't care about me because I ain't got Butler money. Anyway, I'll see y'all Wednesday. See y'all on the Substack. Y'all can continue this conversation on the Substack if you want to. I just got to head out. If nothing else, y'all got any questions, any comments?
No, thank you.
All right, y'all. All right, I'll see y'all next week.
Thank you. Enjoy your night.